Why did the Torah tell us he's the most humble individual that ever walked the face of this earth? Just saying he was humble would have been good enough. Because it's coming to show us that it was his humility that gave him access to God in a way that no one ever else had that opportunity to access. This week, Parashat Shlach in the book of Bamidbar. Actually, something very interesting about Parashat Shlach. If we look at the chronological order of what actually happened for the Jewish people during this period of time, actually we see the way it's recorded in the Torah is not the way it actually took place. The way it was first Miriam spoke, like we saw at the end of last week's Torah portion, negatively about Moshe to her brother Aharon. And she was punished for that. She had leprosy. The whole camp waited 7 days, could not continue traveling without her. The next episode that happens chronologically was the whole dispute between Korach and his rebellion of Moshe Rabbeinu, against Moshe Rabbeinu. This was the next thing that happened. And then came the story of the spies. If we look in our Torah, we don't see the order to be as such. We first see Miriam, then it skips, it goes to the story of the spies, which is this week's Torah portion, Parashat Shlach. Next week is Parashat Korach. So the Me'am Lo'ez poses the question, as many of our Mefarshim, why did the Torah switch the order of the way it actually happened? He answers as follows. He says, the spies, and we'll soon explain how many there were and how and what, but for all intents and purposes, the spies did not learn the lesson that Miriam came to actually teach. Miriam came and she spoke in a negative fashion about her brother, but she had good intentions. We explained last week a couple different interpretations, but nevertheless she had good intentions to speak negatively about Moshe, and she was still punished. Her punishment for using her tongue in an improper way, in a derogatory way. What happens? So then Korach comes, and then comes the issue of the spies. The Torah says, no, let's bring the spy story and juxtapose it with the story of Miriam to teach us, you know what the problem of the spies were? They did not learn the lesson of Miriam. She misused her mouth, even with good intentions. They came with rotten intentions. And they didn't learn from Miriam to watch her mouth the way she didn't watch her mouth, and they didn't watch their mouths. That's why they're put together. That's why the order, the chronological order, happened a certain way, but the Torah records it in a different way. If we look right at the beginning of this week's Torah portion, there's a lot of important things we have to just give ourselves an introduction to before we get into the depth of this Torah portion. And we start right at the beginning of the Torah portion. Chapter 13, verse 1, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God speaks to Moses. Note, it says Vaydaber, Dibur, which is more stringent, stronger terminology, opposed to Vayomer, as it is most of the time. Next verse, verse 2. Shlach lecha anashim, send for yourself men, viaturu et eretz Canaan, and let them spy, take a tour around the land of Canaan, asher ani noten livnei Israel, that I'm giving to the Jewish people. Take a representative of each and every tribe to go to the land of Israel. Right away, two important things we want to mention is it says Shlach lecha. God tells Moses, send for yourself. That's the translation. Could have easily said Shlach anashim v'yaturu et haaretz. Why Shlach lecha, send for you? The Midrash tells us exactly what took place. There was no need. God never intended on the spies or anyone taking a look at the land before so. But this is what happened. The Jewish nation comes to Moses and says, we want to see the land we're going into. And Moses says, okay, what's your reason? They say, you and God promised us that the land that we're going to go to is going to be full of houses, full of wealth and riches. We want to send spies we want to send ambassadors to go see if this is the land that you were really talking about. So Moses says, okay, can't hurt. It's not that bad. I'm sure Moses says that this is the land God had promised us. But before we do such a tremendous act and a decision, let me see with God if it's okay. So Midrash says that Moses goes to God and says, God, the nation wants to send representatives to go see the land. Listen to what God tells Moses, the Midrash tells us. God tells Moses, they're pulling a quick one on you. After all, you're a human being. You don't see everything. They can't pull a quick one on me. But it's okay. In order to reassure the nation, do what you have to do. If they're requesting it from you, and you feel like that's the right thing to do, go for it. But God says, I know why they want it. They've done this over and over again. They've proven to have a lack of emunah, a lack of belief in me, God says. So send them. But send them for you. Send them for you and send them for them. Because it's not for God. So that's why it says, Shlach lecha, send them for you. Moses was the one who approached God and said, this is what the nation is requesting. God says, yalla, do it. And now we see the ramifications. The Torah then rattles off and lists all 12 of the elected individuals which were sent as ambassadors to the Jewish, to Canaan, which is soon going to be Israel, Eretz Yisrael. One per tribe. After the Torah tells us each one, for the tribe of Reuven, for the tribe of Shimon, and each and every one, listen to what the Torah says. Torah says, I'm in verse 16. Ele shemot ha'anashim asher shalach Moshe latur et haaretz. These were, the ones that I just counted, the names of the individuals who were sent to spy the land. Vayikra Moshe leHoshea bin Nun Yoshua. And Moses changes Yehoshua's name to be Yoshua. His name was really Hoshea, and he changes his name to be Yehoshua. The Mefarshim, the commentaries explain, the reason Moses did this is he added a Yud in order to make it like Yud and Hey, which is God's name, Ka. Yoshiecha will be there to protect you and to help you in this mission that you're going on. Actually, the Midrash goes on and actually explains how the Yud that Yoshua was granted was actually the Yud that was taken away from Sarah Imenu. Sarah's her birth name was Sarai. And the Yud was taken away and was replaced with a Hey. But that Yud felt bad. You're taking me away from a righteous woman's name. So God says, don't worry. Your name will be used for a great leader of the Jewish people, none other than the successor of Moshe Rabbeinu, Yoshua bin Nun. The Zera Shimshon, he asks a very interesting question. He says, I understand Moses' prime student, his elected student was Yoshua bin Nun. But why did he change his name only? Either way, if each of them need a special protection and a special blessing, change all of the 12 individuals' names. And if not, then none of them need. But not all of them have Hashem's name in their name. So why, he's asking, either change everyone's name or don't change anyone's name. Why was Moses seemingly showing favoritism to his prime student by changing his name and giving him an added blessing in his name? Now this is a very interesting concept he answers with. The answer is based on what the Arizal teaches us. The Arizal says something quite mystical, and he says that each and every one of the representatives of each tribe, when they went into the land of Israel to spy it, the land of Canaan, their ancestor, their tribe, actually, meaning the son of Yaakov, each one respectively, came into them, their soul merged with theirs to help them go and have a successful trip in order to protect them. So for example, the first of the tribes, the first of the messengers, Shamua ben Zakur, which was from the tribe of Reuven. So Shamua, Mr. Shamua, he enters the land of Israel. Prior to entering, also joins his soul was Reuven himself. Reuven passed away many years prior. And to each and every tribe, so for the tribe of Shimon also, and Levi, and Yehuda, and each and every one, the original tribe leader, the Shevet himself, his soul, entered this ambassador's body as well. However, the Arizal explains that there was one tribe that did not send a messenger, and that was the tribe of Levi. If we look through the 12 names, we don't find Levi. And the reason is simple, because the tribe of Levi did not get a portion of the land of Israel. Now that was a blessing, it was not a curse. Actually, they were able to live anywhere, and they didn't have to work the land. Their livelihood was provided from their service in the temple, and from God directly in a more miraculous fashion. So they did not send a messenger. But there was nevertheless still 12 spies which were sent. How does that happen? Well, it makes a lot of sense. Because the children of Yosef each received a portion. Ephraim and Menashe. So what happens? Look at the following. When it comes to Lemate Yosef, Lemate Menashe, Gadi ben Susi. So according to the Arizal, Yosef HaTzadik's own neshama enters Gadi ben Susi. And who was the representative for Ephraim? Yoshua bin Nun. Whose neshama did he receive as his help, as his aid to go into the land of Israel? None other than Levi. Because it was one of the tribes. It was the 12 tribes that entered. It was not Yosef's children, Ephraim and Menashe, whose souls entered in. It was the 12 tribes. So the soul of Yosef already went to this individual, Gadi ben Susi. But whose extra neshama did Yoshua receive? Levi. Now who was Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu was a direct descendant of Levi. Because he was a direct descendant of Levi, and he did not want to in any way shame or endanger his great-grandfather's neshama, that's why the Zera Shimshon explains that he gave an extra blessing to Yoshua. Not because of Yoshua, who he was. Look how it's very deep. Not because of who Yoshua was, but because of whose neshama Yoshua bin Nun was entering the land of Israel with. Who? Moshe Rabbeinu's great-grandfather. Not for Yoshua himself. That's one answer that Zera Shimshon gives. It's a deep answer, it's an interesting answer. He gives another answer. He says that, you know what? Your question of why is he showing favoritism to Yoshua being his prime student is the very answer. Since Yoshua was Moshe Rabbeinu's prime student, he did show extra favoritism to him. He did pray more for him. He did want more success for him. And it's the nature. This is a main misconception people have when it comes to the concept of favoritism. Favoritism is when you have two things or two people that it's the exact same scenario, exact same details, exact same character traits, exact same actions. And for no good reason, that's what favoritism is, for no good reason you favor one over the other. But when an individual has multiple children, or students, family members or friends, and one of them is investing in the relationship in a stronger way, automatically there is some type of draw on your behalf for extra positivity and extra intention, and even, as we'll call it, favoritism, but not in a negative way. If we draw back to the first claim to favoritism as a non-fair way in our Torah, we can draw back to Cain and Hevel. Cain and Hevel, they each brought their sacrifices to God. Cain being the first, Hevel being the copycat, as Cain claimed. Yet God took Hevel, the second brother's offering, and not the first, and not Cain's. And everyone jumps, oh, there's the first display of favoritism in our Torah, and it's not fair. And look at the favoritism that Rivka shows towards Yaakov over Esav. And look, even prior, look at Avraham showing more favoritism towards Yitzhak and not Ishmael. Where does that come from? Look, even Yitzhak showing it towards Esav and not Yaakov. Where does that come from? That comes from the intention. It comes from the relationship. God knew that Cain was sending the garbage of his flock. No, not of his flock, of his grain. The garbage, the grain, the leftovers. It didn't come with a full heart, full intention. And he knew that Hevel, he brought the best, the fattest, and the first of his animals. He saw that he was coming full-heartedly. He favored him over the first. But not because it was the exact same details and same case. Each one was different. Their heart, their intention was different. So too by each of the other siblings with their parents. If it's for Avraham, Ishmael, and Yitzhak, and if it's for Yitzhak and Rivka, their two children, and even Yaakov towards Yosef, there was favoritism over there, but there was a reason for it. I'm not giving a blanket allowance to display favoritism towards individuals, and especially towards children, because we see that it's detrimental. But there's a reason why that happens. Here too, when a teacher has a student who studies and learns and serves and is with them all the time, it's obvious that they bring them closer, that they swallow them up, that they help them more, that they pray for them more, because they're connected. So Zera Shimshon says, even though he was his prime student, that was the reason why he did pray more for him, and that he did change his name, specifically his name. So the Zera Shimshon is giving us two different interpretations. One, on the aspect of Moshe looking out for his own good, meaning his own great-grandfather Levi's soul, who entered Yoshua bin Nun. The second answer is no, really, Yoshua deserved the extra blessing, deserved the favoritism because of all the involvement and the investment he invested into that relationship between him and Moshe Rabbeinu. The lesson for us is, again, to try to limit our display of favoritism, especially towards children and grandchildren. It's very hard. Sometimes it's very hard. You have one child that maybe disrespects and one that respects, and one that's always screaming and yelling and complaining, and one that's the easiest child. As parents, our duty, and grandparents, our duty, is to be as fair as possible. At least not openly show and display favoritism that we show. If you want to, we see already by our patriarchs and our matriarchs how they did display favoritism, but privately. We don't want to cause animosity. All we want to do is create peace amongst friends, family, even students, even as a teacher, as a rabbi, as a mentor. Of course, there are certain people who come closer that you are there more for them, you maybe give them more time. It's a fact of life, but not to let it be so obvious to turn others away. As teachers, as parents, as grandparents, we have to try to be as accessible to those who need us as much as possible in a fair way. Yet, we have to understand, on a deeper level, the more you invest, the more you give towards a relationship, the more that is going to actually come out from it.